It's breaking news. Australia's financial intelligence agency AUSTRAC is pursuing Westpac for 23 million contraventions of laundering and counter-terrorism laws. AUSTRAC alleges the bank failed to report more than $11 billion of international transfers over 5 years.
Westpac's acknowledged commencement of civil proceedings by AUSTRAC in a statement just released. In the statement, they've said Westpac Group has this morning received a statement of claim from AUSTRAC commencing civil proceedings in relation to alleged contraventions of Westpac's obligations under the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act. Westpac has previously disclosed in its full 2019 reporting that it had self-reported a failure to report a large number of international funds transfer instructions, also known as IFTIs, to AUSTRAC, and that AUSTRAC was also investigating a number of other areas relating to Westpac's processes, procedures and oversight. Westpac is currently reviewing AUSTRAC's statement of claim and will issue a further statement to the ASX once it has been assessed.
AUSTRAC had detailed the various allegations against Westpac at a news conference. Here's the AUSTRAC chief.
Westpac failed to appropriately assess and monitor the ongoing money laundering and terrorism financing risks associated with the movement of money into and out of Australia through correspondent banking relationships. Westpac failed to report over 19.5 million international funds transfer instructions to AUSTRAC. Over nearly 5 years, these transfers were both in and out of Australia and amounted to over $11 billion. This resulted in a significant loss of intelligence to AUSTRAC and our national security and law enforcement partners. Westpac failed to pass on information about the origin of international funds transfers and keep records as required by law. And Westpac failed to carry out appropriate customer due diligence on high-risk transactions to the Philippines and Southeast Asia concerning known financial indicators relating to potential child exploitation risks.
While this compliance issue was foreshadowed in their annual general meeting, the absolute enormity and scale of it wasn't anticipated, and so that has been the major reaction this morning. The Prime Minister Scott Morrison was asked about it at his news conference in just the last half hour.
I'm appalled. I'm absolutely appalled. But what it also shows is two things. The banks need to keep lifting their game, but it also shows that our cop on the beat AUSTRAC is doing their job. Just as it was with the CommBank, just has been again with Westpac, and they've just got to lift their game on this stuff. And the other thing they've got to do is they've got to keep supporting whether it's first home buyers or other home buyers or small businesses and others. It's all of this is not a leave pass to pull up the drawbridge in terms of the credit extension into the Australian economy.
Joining us now for more on this breaking news is Sky News business editor Tikki Fullerton. And Tikki, this is just an absolutely extraordinary development. We do know this was foreshadowed, but just the extent of it was really not anticipated.
Well, not anticipated, and clearly not anticipated this move from AUSTRAC by Westpac either. Their response, as you said, on the record is that they're reviewing it. They're going to come back to the ASX, in due course, they say. Look, I think the most interesting thing is really to look now into the statement of claim, what AUSTRAC is drilling down to on these international funds transfers, and in particular around the Philippines and Southeast Asia. In the statement of claim, Annalise, they talk about systematic failures in Westpac's control environment, quote, indifference by senior management and inadequate oversight by the board. The AUSTRAC claim also noted one customer opened a number of Westpac accounts after serving a custodial sentence for a child exploitation offence. Westpac promptly identified activity on one account that was indicative of child exploitation, but failed to promptly review activity on other accounts. Not only that, since at least 2013, Westpac was aware of the heightened child exploitation risks associated with frequent low payments to the Philippines and Southeast Asia, both from AUSTRAC guidance and from its own risk assessments. And even further, I would say that actually the statement of claim also alleges that Westpac has still not implemented automated systems to monitor child exploitation risks. And I quote again, it wasn't until June 18 that Westpac implemented appropriate automated detection scenario to monitor for the known child exploitation risks through its LightPay platform, but it has still not implemented that appropriate automated direction scenarios to monitor for child exploitation risks through other channels. Now, here is InvestSmart's Evan Lucas, who we spoke to just a few moments ago firstly about what the market reaction has been.
It's very, very serious from the market's perspective. We've known this was coming. They outlined in their numbers about a week and a half ago that there was going to be some form of AUSTRAC litigation, that they were unable at this point to actually put some form of monetary figure on it. The share price somewhat reacts to it, but today we now probably get an understanding about what that could be, and the share price has fallen 2.5% at pretty much the open of the market, and it's held there since. The seriousness of it is the way that you look at what happened with CBA and how they were found out for their 53,000 sort of breaches. We are talking about possibly as much as 23 million. So it was $700 million at CBA. The cost to Westpac is probably going to be significantly more. Market is telling you that straight away. It's also the fallout that came from this with regards to CBA and what happened to Ian Narev, several board members, etc. You would now have to also suggest would go towards Brian Hartzer and co. and where this actually sits. It's a huge piece of litigation, and the provisioning will start now. And as I said, it is going to be incredibly large, and it probably will be a new record in AUSTRAC numbers.
Now, guys, you also heard the Prime Minister talk there. I mean, this issue, because it is related to child exploitation, of course it is another issue around reputation for the banks to deal with. Here's Evan Lucas again on what this does to bank reputation.
Ramifications is, again, unquantifiable at this point. Reputation is huge, and that's probably the way to look at this, particularly considering that, KYC, AML, counter-terrorism protection policies into particularly Southeast Asia, where the breaches have been alleged to occur, has been front and centre for AUSTRAC for 5 years. So that also goes to the seriousness of it and the reputational damage that the due diligence, governance, overall compliance around operating in these markets has clearly not been met. The reputational damage, as I said, unquantifiable at this point. It's a question of also how deep it goes into what is clearly a horrible part of this overall scenario and possibly operations around this in the Philippines. That will be how bad the reputational damage is. And clearly, in the next month, you would expect already to see some head roll, and then further down the track as more allegations come out, and how this will play out will basically govern the reputational damage to Westpac.
So, Annalise, Kieran, very small transaction, but a horrible space. We're yet to hear back from Westpac on this, hopefully later today.
And Tiki, I guess, I think it's fair to say, certainly it appears inevitable that heads will roll. The question is how far up the scale they'll go.
Well, look, you heard Evan Lucas there mention Brian Hartzer. I mean, that's as high as you can go from the top. Now, as I say, we are yet to hear from Westpac. The statement of claim also included reference to the board there. I mean, these are very difficult issues because this bank is one of the four pillars. It holds up Australia's financial system, and we await their response, obviously. But as you can see by the market response and also the commentary that is flowing out this morning, this is very serious, and it should rightly go to the top layers for a response on the accountability.